Hey everyone, and welcome to the Pisgah Podcast.
Thank you for listening to Pisgah. We are your hosts, Drew and Mangler. We're coming to you live from the camp shelter on the Black Mountain Trail.
You know, you get here and you're like, oh, we're halfway up Black Mountain Trail, but not really. It's got a lot of tech climbing to go.
A few places you got to get off and shoulder your bike for sure.
The Pisgah Shuffle.
Yep. Any news or updates from the previous week?
This week, I got a couple of small rides in. My back kind of tweaked out, and I've been in heavy work mode, so not much to really write home about. With my work mode, usually comes a lot of COVID testing, and I had a couple of questions posed to me over the past week about, what's up with, why are you getting all these COVID tests? Well, working in television right now is... Technically, it's risky because we have people on screen that are unmasked. We call that red zone. And so to make sure everyone is safe, we've been doing COVID tests for obviously cast and crew members. So it's something that's taken pretty seriously. So they just want to make sure everyone's safe. So that leads to a lot of COVID tests. And since Sunday, I've had 3. So yeah, been a busy week for my nose.
Yeah, sounds like it. It's never fun. You get swabbed up the nose, and sometimes that almost makes you feel like you got to sneeze worse than being sick.
Yep, get the old brain poke.
Yeah.
What about your week? What you got going on?
It's been boring. I've been playing chicken with the weather. Haven't gotten anything done. But I did get a new bottom bracket for my bike, and unfortunately uses a tool that I didn't have, so I had to wait a few days for that to show up. So now I've got everything running good and back together, and hopefully I'm going to take advantage of this nice, nearly 60-degree weather tomorrow and get out for a ride.
Yeah, hopefully you can find somewhere that's got some semi-dry dirt.
Yeah.
Tim from Norco said that he was at Canoga today, and it was drying up really well on the south-facing stuff, so that could be an option.
Yeah, that's totally an option. It's totally on the board. Whatever it will be, we'll make sure we scout it out well enough, though, and treat the trails well.
Yeah, that's definitely key right now. For this week's discussion, it's always an interesting topic to discuss with other riders how they carry their necessary bits when on a bike ride. So, Drew, what is your methodology to carrying around your bike needs?
Yeah, I'm kind of pigeonholed here. I'm a short guy, so this causes me a couple of problems when it comes to carrying my flat gear and water and things like that. For one, most packs are too long for my torso, and there's definitely exceptions to this, like a women's specific pack, but sometimes those come with smaller shoulder loops and they kind of cut in. And they generally just have less volume if it's a smaller pack. The bikes I ride tend to be mediums and sometimes smalls, so I have less available space on the frame to strap things, and so it pretty much just leaves me with the waist pack. It works really good. I can carry everything I need and then some. It's comfortable. Even helps hold up my britches when they get a little saggy.
Yeah.
I do have some bibs with storage that I'll use for shorter rides in the summertime. Having gear in my bibs is a few layers deep is not the most efficient this time of year. So I tend to only use that when it's mission specific.
Yeah, I understand. I know where you're coming from with the bib pockets. That's pretty much my go-to. Like the swap bibs that Specialized does are some of my favorites. A couple other brands have some good ones like the Race Face ones. I find that some of the other brands, the pockets are too shallow, and I've had my phone fall out of them a couple of times. So right now I'm rocking swap bibs. I've got like some summer ones, some regular ones, and then like some winter longer ones that are have a little fleece lining in them. So those are like my main go-tos. I go very light on my packing, but I still try to make sure I have all the necessities that I may need. On those summer rides where it's going to be more than like an hour, I'm going to throw in a Catadine water filter bag. What's interesting about this filter is it's kind of like a collapsible bag. So I can fill it up and then I can stash it in a swap bib pocket. And when I need it, I can just refill my bottle from that, or I can just drink out of it. obviously I'm going to have a water bottle on my bike. Tool-wise, I rock the 1-Up EDC tool between my water bottle and frame, but I also carry a SWAT tool, just the basic one on the water bottle cage. SWAT tool's a little quicker to get to for those. Sometimes you need to make like a quick adjustment on like seat post height or a lever adjustment or something. Just a little quicker to get to than popping the tool out of the EDC. And then the EDC has a few other goodies in it, like it's got the chain breaker. It's got a couple of smaller Allens in it that the specialized tool doesn't have. So it's helpful to have that. As far as like flat kit and stuff, I have the Revelate jerry can bag. That's the type of bag that straps to the top of your top tube at your seat post. And in that, I keep my smaller essentials like a tube, CO2, tire lever, some zip ties. Pro tip, if you get some Maxxis tires, save that zip tie, free zip tie. So I think I have 2 of those in that bag right now left over. So some nice reuse there. I'll keep a couple of chain links, and most importantly, I keep Pisgah Podcast stickers. So if you see me out and about, I got you.
Stick them on everything.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I've got one of those Revelate jerry can bags. I just haven't used it yet. I haven't actually put it on a mountain bike. I've used it on my touring bike and things like that. But yeah, speaking of frame bags and carrying stuff, we've got the bike packer himself, Logan Watts, for this week's interview.
Yeah, we do. And to be honest, this interview was part of a Shredders and Shakers project that I recorded last year on kind of my first ever bike packing trip with Logan and TJ Kearns. We did a cool trip leaving from bikepacking.com world headquarters in Brevard. We pedaled up to Turkey Pen Gap, through Cantrell, across Squirrel, and we set up camp at a sweet spot off South Mills River Trail.
Sounds like an excellent trip, but more importantly, what's up with the Shredders and Shakers project?
Oh man, I could just go on and on with excuses about that podcast. I really love doing it, but honestly, it takes a lot of time to do. And a lot of my free time has been focused on the Pisgah Podcast, which is a little more, I'm not going to say easier to put out. It's just quicker to put out. So, between you and I teaming up on this project, we can keep content flowing on our weekly schedule that we have. So it kind of works out. But what was cool about going out with Logan and TJ is they kind of showed me a lot of the cool tricks of the trade when it comes to like some bike packing stuff. And them introducing me to a lot of these frame bags is kind of what led me to rocking this Revelate jerry can bag on my bike. Because essentially, instead of having multiple bags for each bike, because everyone has to have more than one bike, I just have one frame bag, and whatever bike I'm going to ride, I just grab that bag and stick it on the bike. Now that has bit me before, where I have left the house without it and not had my goodies with me. But fortunately, nothing happened, so I was good. That dice rolled in my favor. But I'm psyched to get this Logan interview out. There's probably 40 more hours of audio from this project that I've yet to do anything with. Who knows? I've still got plenty of content that I could do a Shredders and Shakers podcast episode with bike packing, which I still plan to do. So almost consider this as a teaser to the Shredders and Shakers This Is How You Bike Pack episode. So without further ado, here is Mr. Logan Watts. He is the head honcho, the HMFIC of bikepacking.com.
To make this chair squeak too much. It's like old recliner.
I like how you're in this throne-looking chair, and then here I am in some camp chair.
Yeah.
What's your professional background like?
I went to school for graphic design. Back then, it was all like using pens and markers and French curves and stuff like that. So during my schooling, it transitioned into computer design. And shortly thereafter, interactive became a thing, and I kind of taught myself that. And right out of college, got a job at a branding firm and kind of started the interactive department within that branding firm. Shortly thereafter, I quit, kind of took off on my own, started freelancing, and eventually started a website design firm. So that's what I've been doing.
Do you still do much freelance like graphic and web design stuff nowadays?
No, it's all for bikepacking.com at this point.
What led you to go from your freelancing and web firm stuff into doing bikepacking.com?
So back in 2011, I guess it's probably started in 2010, 2009, somewhere around there. I was just super burnout, working way too many hours a day. The financial crisis happened. I didn't really start mountain biking until 2006, 2007, somewhere in there, and just kind of got hooked and started, ingesting as much possible, bike media as I could, and stumbled on bike touring and saw what Cass Gilbert was doing with kind of more off-road touring. And all those ideas just started spiraling out of control. So in 2010-ish, I decided I was going to sell my company and take off. And I guess it was 2011 when I was actually able to, I wouldn't say sell, but get rid of my company. And Virginia and I took off on a long bike tour through Mexico and Central America. Essentially I started it as a blog.
Yeah.
It's called Pedaling Nowhere, and we essentially just used it to document our trip.
What led it to getting more focused on bikepacking gear and routes and stuff like that?
So somewhere along that trip, we started doing more off-road type stuff. I got inspired by a lot of people who were doing Tour Divide. Bikepacking was kind of new at that point in time. It really wasn't a widely used term. So, when we got back from that trip, I started doing all these kind of smaller, more single track focused stuff on, full suspension mountain bike or whatever I happen to have. And at some point in time, maybe 2014, I came up with the idea of sharing different routes that I was putting together, and people like Cass and Joe were putting together. And so we made kind of this little map application and some rudimentary ways of people to contribute routes. At that point in time, traffic was increasing, and I kind of knew that a lot of people were getting into this stuff, and at that exact point in time, all of a sudden bikepacking took off. So
yeah,
it was kind of a natural progression, really.
When did you launch bikepacking.com?
I can't remember if it was 2014 or 15, but somewhere right in there.
So 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah, basically it was pedalingnowhere.com was the blog, and then it kind of just transitioned into bikepacking.com. So I basically just changed the name.
Basically just the redirect.
Yeah, you can still find all that old content on there.
Still on bikepacking?
Oh yeah.
Oh, nice. Have to dig pretty deep.
Pretty deep. I think we have like 3,500 some odd articles now or something.
Holy
it's
shit.
pretty crazy.
Yeah. Did you have worries? You'd mentioned about getting burnt out working the more or less the corporate web life,
Mm-hmm.
and that can burn you out real quick.
Yeah.
But did you have worries about basically turning your passion, which is bike riding and bike packing, into a job?
I actually did. I remember a buddy of mine told me, he was like, well, you're going to have to worry about actually getting burnt out on biking.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, nah, there's no way that's going to happen. And, it hasn't, certainly. I mean, I get burnt out on some things sometimes, like, every once in a while I'll get tired of writing reviews or, whatever. But in my free time, I go biking. So it's like, that's what I love to do. And I can't imagine that changing.
Yeah. Do you think that you having a love and passion for bike riding makes it easier to review parts and write articles?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm still, still kind of a nerd at heart when it comes to bike parts and stuff like that. So it plays a good part in, keeping things interesting.
So your kind of introduction to bike packing was through bike touring. Like you and Virginia did a trip, and before you did that big trip, had you done other bike touring stuff?
Not really. No, we did one practice trip before that, but yeah, it was kind of all or nothing. We essentially sold a lot of our stuff, put everything in storage, rented our house out, whole hog. We were freaking out and taking off.
Yeah.
So the only other trip we did before that, this is when we lived in Charlotte, and we drove up here and parked at the fish hatchery and rode on 475B with our heavy ass touring bikes, 4 panniers, way too much shit, canned food, all that stuff, chairs, whatever. We rode up 475B and then kind of all the way up to the Parkway and camped up off the Parkway and, then came back down.
Screaming down 276.
Yeah.
You mentioned a couple of people that were kind of, some inspiration for, doing the bike touring and stuff. What was an introduction to you to combining mountain biking and backpacking, essentially? Because you've mentioned to me in the past that you had done some hiking and stuff.
I mean, well, one of the first like really bike packing trips I did was before I had any bike packing bags. I had a old Ibis Mojo. Just took some dry bags, strapped them on the handlebars, and rode up to the Rich Mountain Shelter and camped up there. So that was kind of an introduction from a logistical standpoint. We just basically wanted to go ride all the way down Black Mountain. So we decided to go camp up there and then ride it the next morning. Just a short trip.
What year was this?
I think it was probably later on might have been early 2013. But in terms of, I guess, what led to that, I used to do a lot of backpacking on the Appalachian Trail. So it was kind of connecting the dots with getting out in the woods on a bike, far away from people, and, making it happen.
And that's the beauty of some of the national forests in our area is like they cover this long expanse of the mountain range that runs through the state. Mm-hmm. So you have like huge swaths of national forest that you can either use forest roads or trail or like the Blue Ridge Parkway to connect a lot of these things.
Yeah.
It's easy to want to do that.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the routes that I retraced, it actually wasn't really a route per se. It was the Virginia Mountain Bike Trail, but there were kind of some notes and forum whispers about it and stuff. There wasn't actually a map, but I talked to the person who created it, and Chris Scott up in Stokesville, and told him I kind of wanted to try it, rewrite it, and he was like, "Well, it's hard, it's really far out there." I was like, "That sounds fantastic." So
sign me up.
That's kind of the one that really hooked me. Before that I was doing a lot of, more kind of weekend trips or, shorter overnighter kind of trips. But that one was pretty impressive. I mean, you get deep on the spine of the Virginia Blue Ridge, which is pretty amazing.
And that's hard riding on the spine.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's like average speed 2-3 mile an hour.
There's a lot of hiking bike in there for sure, especially once you have bags and you're carrying 3 days worth of food. It's pretty rough, but it's cool.
And that's the thing about being up on that spine is like you don't want to drop off the spine because it's like 1,500 feet vertical, and then you got to drop down to town, get stuff, and then get back up to the spine.
Mm-hmm. So, I actually did that before going tubeless, and I remember I think it was on my second day. I was already beat because I was like, holy shit, this is a lot harder than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
So I think I got 3 or 4 different like in one day.
Oh, just snake bites left and right.
Yeah, ran out of patches and had to drop all the way down off the spine, find a Walmart to get some, like some Bell branded patches and stuff.
Some of the sticky pill on
there. And a new tube as well, and then climb all the way back up. And I was just like, shit, this sucks. But, quickly forgot about that.
Yeah. So kind of run me through the kind of the history of, modern bike packing. How's that looking like on a timeline? Yeah,
that's kind of a tough one. I mean, there was a lot of different stuff going on at a lot of different times. From the perspective of bags, which kind of has driven the industry, I guess, a little bit. Revelate Designs was kind of one of the forefathers of modern bike packing bags. And a lot of that stuff was, people racing the Tour Divide, back, I think it started in 2008. It's the first running of it. But people were doing stuff like that before. But a lot of the drive for that type of equipment was people racing that said, I need something better. I need something smaller, lighter, faster. And so people would kind of go back to their sewing machines and tinker around and come up with, new ways and new ideas on how to, strap gear onto their hardtails or whatever kind of bike they were using. I think Revelate was one of the first companies to actually take that and make, production bags. So, they started making the Viscacha seat bag, which, I think was one of the first production, like, seat bags on the back.
Like the big bag you see hanging off the back of
Yeah,
a seat.
exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then they made like the sweet roll, which is, the handlebar roll up front. And then people were making custom frame bags at that point in time. So, yeah, a lot of it had to do with racing. I think I always point to that fact as the Tour Divide is kind of the, what started bike packing, essentially.
Pretty much since the advent of the bicycle, people have been using it as a mode of transportation. Obviously, they would do overnight trips, bike touring and stuff like that. But mountain biking as itself is still in its infancy, not even 30 years old, barely.
Right.
So, mountain bike packing is even younger than that. So it's...
Yeah, it is, and it isn't at the same time. I mean, you look at, obviously, the bike packing specific bags, the kind of high-tech X-Pack stuff like that, is what a lot of people would consider bike packing. But then again, there's also, stuff like the old style, long flap saddle bags, which, people were doing that kind of stuff way back in the day, back in the probably 40s and 50s.
Oh, yeah.
There's an Instagram account called RSF Archive, which is the Rough Stuff Fellowship Archive, of all these people doing these really insane trips on kind of older road bikes with, what looks like bike packing gear, just basically pushing their old bikes up into the mountains and doing these crazy trips. So I don't know if there's really an official start date, but, as I mentioned, I think I always point to the Tour Divide as kind of what you'd consider the start of modern bike packing, so to speak. Resurgence, I guess, if you will.
I think kind of what introduced me to bike packing originally was when it was Rocky Mountain came out with that bike.
Yeah.
That was
The
like
Sherpa.
The Sherpa, yeah. It was like a trail bike focused a little bit, but they had a line of bags and stuff for it.
Yeah.
Right?
That thing was a little bit of ahead of its time, really. I mean, there still isn't a huge market for, full suspension bike packing per se.
Yeah.
A lot of people do it. I mean, the Colorado Trail Race and the Arizona Trail Race and things like that. That's primary bike on those races. But I'm trying to think when the Sherpa came out. I feel like it was like 2014 or 15.
Yeah.
Kind of right as bike packing was starting to progress. So yeah, it was a little early, but it was a cool bike. I mean, they did that. They filmed the promo video on the Black Canyon Trail, which is kind of one of the more, one of the older bike packing routes that runs from somewhere up near Sedona all the way down to Phoenix.
I remember seeing that video. It kind of opened my eyes to like, I could put together some really dumb routes, and it could be really cool.
Yeah, that's the fun. I mean, and that's the fun part about it. That's honestly what got me into it was, well, aside from retracing routes like the Virginia Mountain Bike Trail, was coming up with stupid ideas and interesting ways of concocting this giant ride that would, either be ridiculous or really beautiful, or, B, tie in some sort of conceptual map, like when we did the Appalachian Beer Trail, which, was just kind of a stupid idea, but it ended up being awesome.
The best ideas start off as dumb ideas.
Yeah. Just tie a bunch of random breweries together in western North Carolina and try to do it all on dirt. It's going to be a blast.
Yeah, for sure. When it came time for you in Virginia to kind of like set up shop somewhere, what brought you to Brevard?
Our families are both in North Carolina, and we've been coming up to Brevard for quite some time. We used to camp at the Davidson River campground, which is, almost spitting distance from here at this point. So I don't know. It was always somewhere that kind of felt like home. And, we looked around at other places, and I kind of really wanted to live in Colorado or Arizona, but prices out there are insane.
They really are.
But it does feel like home around here, which is cool.
And you can pretty much ride all year here for the most part.
That's very true, which is nice.
What would you say is a great advantage of running bikepacking.com and living here?
Actually, that's a little tough, and that's kind of one of the things that almost makes me want to live somewhere else, like out west, is Well, that's true and not true. I mean, we're working on the Eastern Divide Trail right now, which is a huge project, and this is a great base for it because it goes right through here.
Yeah.
But otherwise, the public lands on the East Coast are kind of finite, even though, as we were talking about just a few minutes ago, I stumbled upon some old cool road that I'd never ridden, not very far from here. So you never know what you're going to find. But I think that's one of my hangups with the East Coast is the public lands, and finding kind of untouched places here is slightly more challenging. So you have to adapt routes to utilize pavement or bike paths or old rail beds, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's also what makes it interesting. So
Yeah, and I think a lot of people on the East Coast that maybe haven't traveled to the West Coast, they don't understand how vast and open public lands are in the West.
for sure.
Like 10 times the size of Pisgah. People that live in this area that haven't traveled far, they think Pisgah's huge.
Oh yeah. I mean, when I first started coming up here, I remember thinking it was this massive unexplored place. Now to me it seems tiny.
Yeah.
But, again, having stumbled upon that road the other day, you just never know.
Yeah, there's always a little honey hole somewhere.
Yeah, for sure.
With bikepacking.com and some of your associates and people that you roll with, you guys put together new routes and you're always kind of working on that. Talk to me a little bit about that. Like what's your drive for trying to put together a new route?
Well, for me, it was always getting to go out and ride it. I mean, that was kind of first and foremost, and it still is. I think some of the route, like when we put a route together through Cuba, or the one we did recently in Colombia, the drive for me was trying to figure out the absolute best way to explore a place or a region. I think that still holds true. I mean, now this focus on the Eastern Divide Trail, it's essentially trying to come up with the most interesting and beautiful way of riding from, the entire spine of the East Coast, which is a massive undertaking, but it's also, to me, what keeps this interesting is coming up with those really cool rides.
Where are you guys at progress-wise with this trail?
I mean, if I just guess on a blind number, I'd say probably about halfway.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got a lot of it scouted, and a lot of it we kind of know where it's going to go. But looking at the grand scheme of things, like getting all the writing together, all the assets, all the documentation, all that together, I'd say we're probably about halfway.
What's some of your challenges when it comes to putting together a route?
In the East Coast, I think one thing that's quite frustrating is land changing hands and land, getting new ordinances and rules and laws around it. For example, this route that I've been working on for, 5 years almost, a route that I'm pretty passionate about. It actually goes right by my house here. It's going to be called the Waterfalls Ultra Cruise, I think is the name we finally landed on. The big roadblock there has been this piece of land that's a state park, and they all of a sudden decided to ban bikes. So the thing that's kind of frustrating on the East Coast is there's very limited places you can actually run as a corridor. So that was kind of this major corridor. And now that that's blocked, we either have to reroute it completely or, use a chunk of pavement that's not ideal.
And it'd be a big chunk of pavement to go around.
Exactly. It's not unique to the East Coast because it happens everywhere. I mean, we have this route in Spain that's fantastic called the Altravesur, and we've actually had riders on that route email and say, this section of road or trail is closed because somebody bought this piece of land and put a gate here. And it's just like, oh man, it sucks. And not being there, it's kind of hard to correct that. We're actually in the process of creating this whole piece on the website called Route Stewards, where we're gonna try to get people to almost adopt parts of trails or parts of routes, so they can
you can have some boots on the ground at a
exactly
location.
yeah for routes that are kind of scattered all over the place. So
I love scouring over maps, especially when I'm flying on an airplane with no cell service. I'll have Gaia open on my iPad, just like looking at stuff, going through different map layers and checking stuff out. Like it's to me, it's cool.
Yeah.
It's fun to explore, and I look at a lot of the land area around here, and even start looking at like private land area, and like, I wonder if this person knows someone that I know, and I can get in touch with them, and they can allow at least a small group to cross their land or something.
That's something that needs to happen more. I mean, it's kind of random. I was just thinking about this 2 days ago when I can't remember who announced that we were getting ready to go into this massive recession. And I was kind of in the back of my mind thinking, awesome. Because, I mean, around here you have, and this is especially true like over near Cashiers and even, kind of in that area around Headwaters State Park, all these big massive tracts of land get sold, and then they build some crazy development where each house gets 3 acres, and then they gate it off, and there's no way to get around it.
Yeah.
You look at all that land over near the Auger Hole, and there's so many just spirals of cool gravel and dirt roads going back through there, but you can't access it because these lands get sold to developers, and
Yep.
then they resell these houses for $8 million a pop or whatever.
Put them on 10-acre lots and stuff like that.
Yeah, and then there's no talking those kinds of folks into an easement because they're not even there for 9 months out of the year,
if that.
and to them, having people go through that property is a risk because then they have to worry about shit getting stolen or whatever. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
And I think it also comes down to how the state of North Carolina handles land management, because you have places like in Vermont where their land use rights and how their insurances work and stuff like that makes it a lot easier for people to have access to private lands.
Right. Yeah.
So it also comes down to a state level thing as well.
For sure. Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of a pain. You've traveled pretty extensively around the world, either creating routes or riding routes. What's been some of your standout routes that you've ridden?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting question. I guess that's a twofold question because, at some point in time, routes get, you can kind of confuse in your mind the quality of a route versus the quality of a ride. I think a pretty good example of that is our trip in Cuba, which, I mean, that route's pretty amazing, but it's not, I wouldn't say it's the most like scenic and interesting route in terms of the quality of terrain. I mean, a lot of it's flat. You're going through sugarcane fields and stuff like that. There's 3 mountain ranges in Cuba, so you're kind of go through one range and then you're on this flat section, and then you go through another range, and then you're on flat section for several days.
They're pretty steep mountains, though, aren't they?
They are. So it's like this crazy route that's kind of boring at 1 minute and then insane hike a bike at the next. So I wouldn't call it the most like high quality route from a mixed terrain riding perspective, but I mean we had the absolute best time because the people there are fantastic, and it was just it's a beautiful place, and it was just incredibly interesting. On one hand, you have trips like that where, I mean, I'd highly recommend people going and riding that route, not because the route's so amazing, although it's pretty cool, because I know they're going to have a fantastic time because it's an incredible experience, but incredible place to experience rather. But then you have other places like Kyrgyzstan, which, in my mind, it's a route that Joe Cruz kind of conceived, and then we all went and scouted it, and it turned out to just be some of the most phenomenal riding I've ever done in terms of like quality double track and horse paths and just wide open spaces and incredible alpine scenery and stuff like that. So I mean, I guess it kind of can go either way, where you have these just amazing quality riding experiences, and then on the other hand, there's some places that are amazing to ride.
Yeah.
But going back to your original question, I would say Cuba, Kyrgyzstan, Virginia, and I have had some great rides in southern Spain.
Ooh.
It's one of my favorite places to go. And we've also had amazing times in Africa, all over. We rode from Cape Town to Tanzania, and then came back another time and rode through Uganda and Rwanda. All those have been incredible.
The last like minute of recording, what I think people need to understand is like, for you to enjoy bike packing, you have to be open for an unknown adventure.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to rain. You're going to have things break. And at some point in time, you're going to get hangry and throw a fit and perhaps even throw your bike down. It's going to happen. But at the same time, it's part of the magic of it, I guess.
Yeah, it's part of the match, part of the adventure.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's one of the biggest attractive things to me about bike packing is the unknown adventure of it.
Yeah. I mean, hands down, it's extremely hard. I mean, you're pedaling a bicycle that has, somewhere between 20 and 40 more pounds of gear than you normally would have. And you're going to be doing it probably for, often from sun up to sundown, which that alone is,
Yeah.
is hard. So yeah, things are going to happen. But, the point of it all is it's, in my opinion, the only way to see a place and truly kind of get to the right places and meet the people that you normally wouldn't meet and see places that, are off the typical tourist track. Now when Virginia and I talk about, possibly traveling somewhere without a bike, I can't even fathom that because I know it wouldn't be as nearly as rich of an experience.
Wait, we're going where? And we're not taking bikes?
Can't do it.
Sorry.
Yeah. Doesn't make any sense to me.
You just talked about doing these epic, super long adventure rides that are in far off places and countries that I have trouble spelling. But it doesn't have to be that grand and adventurous.
No, not at all. I mean, some of the best trips are, stuff you do right out your back door. I mean, the other night we did a little overnighter and we got rained on and it was otherwise probably would have been pretty rough and horrible, but we timed it perfectly. The fireflies were, I'm assuming they're all, like all the different species were kind of out mating, which doesn't happen a lot. It happens probably once a year when you get this.
It's usually a small window of about 10 days.
Yeah, exactly. But it was mind blowing. And I mean, yeah, we probably could have done that if we'd have gone car camping somewhere, but we ended up at the perfect spot out in the middle of nowhere near this creek, and I've never seen anything quite like it. So yeah, that was an amazing little trip, and it was just, we'd left from here on, and 2:00 in the afternoon, and made it back before 11 a.m. the next day.
What have you seen in the advancements of gear over the years?
It's kind of been interesting because a lot's happened over the last 3 or 4 years, and I think the biggest factor is bigger companies getting in on it. So, who they're competing with are people hand making stuff. So it's, super high quality, and a lot of this gear can, it takes a beating when you're on these trips. So it's got to be made well. So the stuff has to be tough, so that's number one. But in terms of advancements, I would say bigger companies getting involved meant that the equipment and resources they had to construct them got even better. So a lot of people are starting to do radio frequency welding, which means fully waterproof gear. It also usually means that it's made in Taiwan, whereas, a lot of this Revel 8 and stuff made by, local Rockgeist and Bedrock, stuff like that is made out of a lightweight fabric called X-Pack. So it's actually, hand sewn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say the advancements mostly come in the form of materials and construction, waterproof. But there's also been a lot of, people who design this stuff are often bike packers. So they'll see kind of some weird niche need and then make something that works. So it's a lot of small advancements, but
yeah,
some really nice stuff out there now.
How much crossover is there from like lightweight hiking gear to bike packing gear?
I mean, I would say almost all the camping gear is crossover. There are a few, like Big Agnes came out with the Bike Pack Tent series, which, has the shorter poles, so it's basically designed to fit in smaller bags.
I think I remember seeing an Instagram ad of those with a very handsome man sitting in there.
Yeah, I caught hell for that. And there's a couple other things I'm trying to think. Nemo came out with like a bike packing specific tent, but most of the camping gear that's used is, essentially
cross compatible.
It's backpacking gear.
Yeah.
First and foremost.
When it comes to you setting up for a ride, when you're doing a big ride where you're flying somewhere internationally, How much prep time are you usually putting in for bike gear?
Not as much as I used to. I mean, the thing that I think about the most is spare parts and tools, because I've had some really weird stuff happen. I mean, we were in Morocco and Virginia's seat post exploded. So we had to literally catch a bus to a big city just to kind of try and find an Allen bolt that would fit, you know.
Was it dropper post or just regular post?
No, just a regular, I think it was like a Easton post.
Like the seat guts that hold the seat?
Yeah, so the I'm trying to think, I think it was the actual bolt that broke, if I'm remembering correctly.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, like the head snapped off and the whole thing just exploded and went all over the road. So we collected all the parts and realized we had to go get a new bolt. So yeah, now I actually like think through because there's two of us, so it makes the factor for something going wrong even, you know,
A little higher.
a little higher. So I'll actually make it to where we're both using the same seat posts in a lot of situations and bring like one extra bolt. Usually try to make it to where we're running the same tire sizes
Mm-hmm.
so we can, you know, have the right tubes. A lot of looking at bolts and making sure that, you know, nothing's going to be like if I have like a brake caliper that has a, you know, tiny little bolt that's holding the caliper in, I'll make sure I have an extra one of those. A lot of kind of, you know, scrutinizing little bolts and parts.
Yeah, so it takes some attention to detail to really plan out.
Yeah. I don't think it's absolutely necessary. I've just had too many weird things happen to where I'm extra safe.
And
know,
you don't want those to happen again.
don't want them to happen again. Especially on longer trips. I mean, stuff that's under 2 weeks or something, I won't think about too much.
Okay, to me, 2 weeks seems like a really long trip. What some of your bigger trips? How many days are you talking here?
You know, I think the sweet spot in terms of the ones that I really love are about 3 weeks. Like 21 days seems to be a magic number.
Okay.
That's what our Kyrgyzstan trip was. That's what Cuba was. I think we did Uganda in about 30 days. But yeah.
How many miles are you averaging a day? Probably.
Depends.
Yeah.
It really depends on the route. I mean, sometimes, like when Virginia and I traveled through Armenia a couple of years ago, which was also another fantastic route. You know, there were a few days where we were only doing 20 miles a day because it was just tough.
Yeah, it's hard riding. Yeah.
Just super steep. Had a couple of days of, you know, some pretty significant hike-a-bikes that we eventually rerouted to make the route a little more friendly. But yeah, it just depends.
Who is Virginia?
Who is Virginia?
Yeah.
Meet Virginia. My wife of almost 17 years.
So if you find out later that it's wrong, do I have to wait on releasing this podcast till it is almost 17 years?
I think she'd understand. It's funny. I think I had to remind her of our anniversary last year.
Okay. When you guys first got together, was she much into bike riding?
No, neither one of us were, to be honest. Like I said, I didn't start mountain biking until I was, you know, in my mid 30s.
Okay.
So I was kind of a late to the game. But I don't know. I often wonder if that was kind of a good thing, because I just kind of, I mean, I literally just got so into it and still love it. So maybe, you know, had this all transpired when I was 20, who knows? I might be completely bored with it by now or something. I don't know.
You might not have had the passion and stuff
Perhaps
to do the
I
site.
mean, you never know. Everything is timing. So
Did Virginia get into mountain biking about the same time as you did?
no, a couple of years after, I basically started going out with a couple of friends, and you know, we'd start doing these really long rides, which, you know, again is what led me here. But I think she was at that point in time, she was like, you know, you're going off on weekends and leaving me for like all day and 2 days sometimes. I was like, well, let's get you a bike. And
Sure.
we did, and she loved it, so it worked out.
Awesome.
Yeah.
You said your ideal trip is 21 to 30 day range in some scenarios. What about her? Would she agree with that?
Yeah, she likes longer trips. I mean, I think we both like trips where we can, you know, go pedal for like 4 days, 4 or 5 days, and then take a break somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
like in a cool town or, you know, some interesting national forest or whatever it may be. As long as there's that, I think, trips can vary in length, but
Yeah.
we've done a couple trips that were 6 months long. So obviously those can kind of take their toll
Yeah.
on a little bit of everything, but
Mhm.
yeah, depends on the rhythm of the trip. But yeah, I think she also likes, month-long trips.
Did she have much of a hiking or backpacking background?
No, not really. No. The whole camping thing I think was fairly new to her. We both lived in Boone though. We went to school up at Appalachian State, so that was doing outdoor stuff was pretty big up there.
Yeah.
So she had been camping and enjoyed it. But
Going to school at Appalachian State, were you frequently going out into like Limbo Gorge and Wilson Creek area when you were out there?
I was, but it was more on feet.
Yeah.
I didn't really know about bikes at that point in time. They're actually, mountain biking wasn't really big back then. I remember having a couple friends that had, back then I guess it was kind of rigid
Mm-hmm.
mountain bikes, or Rock Shocks was pretty new at that point in time, so it had the Rock Shocks with the little rubber,
Yeah, the rubber stanchion covers.
the accordion boot.
Yeah. And they were probably just out bombing Shoals Mill Road or something.
They'd go bomb globe, yeah.
Yeah, bomb globe and stuff.
That was like the thing to do, and I'd hear them talking. They'd be like, "Oh yeah, you got to get bomb globe." Years later, when I actually did bomb globe, and that was on a bike packing trip, and I was like, "What the hell? This is what they were doing back then? This is just a long gravel road.
Yeah.
It's fun, but it's not exactly the same stuff that's there now, which is these amazing, technical single track stuff, which is great.
Climbing globe sucks.
Oh yeah.
How simple can it be just to go do like an overnighter trip?
It doesn't really require anything, to be honest. We have an article somewhere on the site that kind of talks about that. And as I mentioned, the first time I did it, I had nothing but a backpack and like 2 dry bags that I literally strapped to the handlebars and one kind of behind the seat. The trick is weather and, having gear that's small and light enough to put on a bike. So I think that's probably the biggest barrier to entry. But if you're somewhere like this in the summertime, when you can go to, find one of the 3-walled camping shelters, you don't really need anything other than a half-ass sleeping bag.
And maybe a pad if you want
Maybe a pad if you want to be comfortable.
Yeah.
But to actually do it, you really don't need a lot. To do it right, it's a little bit of a different story. I always recommend if somebody wants to try it or shows any interest, just to strap whatever they have in terms of the gear onto their bike, make sure they have proper tools and stuff like that, and then just go on a really short trip, 5 miles away. That way, if something does happen or it gets super cold, you can turn around and come home.
Yeah, you can always come home.
Yeah.
Or come back to the car.
Right. Because chances are you're going to love it, and you're going to be somewhere in the, forest and enjoy yourself, and you're probably going to do it again, and you're going to figure out what it is you liked, what it is you didn't, what you might need to make it better next time.
Do any companies offer any sort of like a rental or demo program with gear?
Actually, Rockgeist in Asheville does.
Oh, okay.
There aren't too many people that do this. I want to say some of the other smaller bag companies do, but the only one who I'm absolutely positive that does would be Rockgeist.
Okay.
So basically the way he's working it is you can, call ahead, tell him what kind of bike you have. He'll set you up with bags. He may even have tents and stuff like that. I'm not exactly sure, but I know he'll rent bags. So if you just want to go try it, go into Asheville, pick up your bags, pull up one of the routes around here and
Have at it.
I
think that's attractive to a lot of people because, honestly, I don't know how often I'll get out to go bike packing, but it is an investment to get all the bags for your bike.
Yeah. One thing I always tell people is if you think you're going to go bike packing at some point in time, get a frame bag made for your bike.
Yeah.
Because it's pretty awesome to have no matter what. I don't own a bike without a frame bag because I hate carrying backpacks.
Oh, 100%.
And if I go on a trail ride, I'll toss in, a rain jacket, my pump. If I want to go somewhere and hang out, I'll throw a beer and a koozie in there. But it's just a valuable thing to have. I think every bike should have one personally.
Yeah, I mean, obviously some full suspension bikes aren't as adaptable to a frame bag, to a full size frame bag, but you'd be surprised at what, people are making that can fit random
Oh yeah,
bikes.
like the Ibis over there, it has, the two separate, has the shock in the middle, so the frame triangle is divided, but I
Yeah.
had two smaller bags made.
But you do trips with that, and it's
The Ibis?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can fit a lot more in those things than you think.
Yeah.
Plus, having a bottle on a frame, it's nice, but if you think about the way a rectangular shaped bottle is oriented, it just leaves a lot of wasted space.
Yeah, for sure. I'm all about having a good frame bag to some degree. It doesn't have to be a full triangle, but just some sort of a frame bag to put something in.
Yeah, I think a lot of people might not like the way frame bags look. I've heard that quite a bit. And then other people are like worried that all of a sudden the wind's going to blow and it's going to shoot them off the mountain, which is not at all the case. There's a couple of reasons why people don't, choose not to get frame bags and instead have bottles. But
Yeah.
I don't know. To me, it's like the perfect use of that space.
Mm-hmm.
Because for one, it lowers it takes the weight of whatever gear you're putting in it and kind of puts it in the right spot and gives it that low center of gravity in the center. So, it's not affecting the balance of the bike.
Yeah.
Makes a hell of a lot more sense in a backpack.
Yeah. I hate wearing a backpack.
Backpack, you're just pretty much the pendulum that's going to
Yeah.
shift your weight all over the place.
When did you start implementing fly fishing into your trips?
Just last year, actually. I used to fly fish regularly when I lived in Boone a long time ago. And I kind of got bored with it. And honestly, I kind of got to where I felt bad for the fish. And I still kind of do. I mean, it's kind of a mean sport, although it's hard to tell how much they actually feel.
You are ripping lips.
You are ripping lips, yeah. But I don't know.
I keep joking to people that I'm going to start trout fishing, but just like no hook.
Right? Just see if you can get a bite.
Yeah. Just see if I can get a bite. Just become a badass at casting.
Yeah. When a fish comes and like bites your fly, you've won.
Got him. Yes.
It's a good idea.
Yeah. Is fly fishing starting to be a common thing with bike packers?
I think it is kind of popular, actually. I've heard people doing it in all over the place. There's a guy he lives somewhere in Patagonia, and he does a lot of bike fishing down there. So there's people doing it all over the place. I mean, it's kind of cool. It's easy because the equipment, you don't really need a lot.
Yeah.
Especially with the whole Tinkara thing now. You don't even need a reel.
Yeah, just a short little collapsible rod.
Tiny little collapsible rod that weighs nothing. Bring a couple flies and some extra line and you're golden.
Bike fishing.
There's a lot of other mix and match stuff too. A lot of people are, I've heard of quite a few people who are doing, climbing trips mixed in with bike packing.
That could be rough.
Yeah.
Like, that's heavy stuff to carry.
I know. It is. That's kind of one of the bigger ones. One of the more common things is bike rafting, which has become pretty popular. People, strapping, you basically get the pack raft and then you strap the bike to the deck of the pack raft.
Okay.
So essentially climb somewhere and float down. I have yet to bike raft. I should.
We can pedal up to base of Looking Glass Falls and put in there and come back to
Yeah.
town.
TJ's got a couple of routes around here mapped out. I mean, the Davidson I don't think is big enough unless it was high.
Yeah.
That'd be kind of sketchy, but
All the trees across it.
yeah, there's some sketchy spots. But I think he had one on the North Fork or something, and then obviously you could do something on the French Broad,
Yeah.
more of like a lazy river kind of thing.
Yeah, because the French Broad goes slow.
Yeah,
Well, dude, thanks for introducing me to bike packing.
absolutely. Glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah, I just need to give you those bags back now.
Or just hang on to them and we'll go do it again.
I like that idea better.
Cool.
All right, awesome.
Man, so what I'm taking away here is that bike packing must teach you a lot of patience, because that dude seems about as laid back and as patient as you could possibly get, and I think that this is an activity that could probably get you in some stressful situations.
Yeah, if one thing I've picked up on from Logan's wisdom is getting stressed out is a young man's game.
Amen.
All right, guys. So for this week's shout out, wanted to give a huge shout out to the Henderson Hellbenders. That is Henderson County's NICA chapter. They started their practice season last week, and you can follow them on social media at Henderson Hellbenders.
And what is the weather looking like for the coming week?
Not good, dude. Not good at all, really. Like rain Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday looks actually really good. No rain. That could be a good greenway riding day.
So yeah, maybe that's a good time to head down to Traveler's Rest and ride on the Swamp Rabbit.
You know what? That is a grand idea. Swamp Rabbit Trail is a very good resource for us to have close by, and it looks to be about 10 degrees warmer down there on Sunday as well. Go park down in Traveler's Rest and do a chill greenway ride to downtown Greenville and back. Doesn't sound like a bad day.
Not bad at all. I'll take 10 degrees wherever I can get it.
All right, so that wraps up this week's episode of the Pisgah Podcast. As always, you can find us on social media at Pisgah Podcast.
And if you ever packed the kitchen sink for a ride, but you accidentally left your helmet at home, then go ahead and hit that subscribe button.
And it would be really rad if you could share this podcast with your buds and review us on iTunes.
So, we're going to get our 10 degrees down in South Carolina this weekend?
I'm ready to chase the rabbit, dude. For sure.